The Aleut people, also referred to as the Unangan, are the indigenous people of the Aleutian Islands and Shumagin Islands of Alaska, United States and Kamchatka Krai, Russia. Language. While English and Russian are the dominant languages used by Aleut living in the United States and Russia respectively, the Aleut language is still spoken by an estimated 150 people in the United States and 5 people in Russia. The language belongs to the Eskimo Aleut language family and includes 3 dialect groupings: Eastern Aleut, spoken on the Eastern Aleutian, Shumagin, Fox and Pribilof Islands; Atkan, spoken on Atka and Bering Islands, and the now extinct Tetuan dialect. The Pribilof Islands boast the highest number of active speakers of Aleutian. Most of the native elders speak Aleut, but it is very rare for an everyday person to speak the language fluently. Aleut was written in the Cyrillic script beginning in 1829. In the 1870, the language was written in the Latin script. An Aleut dictionary and grammar have been published, and portions of the Bible were translated into Aleut. Tribes. The Aleut dialects and tribes are Tetuan dialect and speaking tribes, Sasignan, Sasshinan, Saskinas and Near Islanders. In the Near Islands, Unangan is a Copper Island Aleut. In the Commander Islands of Russian Federation, Qaxan are Rat Islanders. In the Bordir Island and Rat Islands, Atkan dialect are Western Aleut or Aleut and speaking tribes, Namagus are Delarof Islanders. In the Delarof Islands and Andreanof Islands, Nigujis or Andreanof Islanders. In the Andreanof Islands, Eastern Aleut dialect and speaking tribes, Akugan or Unangan or Islanders of the Four Mountains. In the Islands of Four Mountains, Kawalingan are Fox Islanders. In the Fox Islands, Kiwigan are Kronitzan Islanders. In the Kronitzan Islands, Kagan Talyagang and the Sanak Islanders. In the Sanak Islands, Taxtamam Tunyu dialect of Belkovsky, Kagwigan are Shumagin Islanders. In the Shumagin Islands. Population and distribution. The Aleut people were distributed throughout the Aleutian Islands, the Shumagin Islands, and the far western part of the Alaska Peninsula, with an estimated population of around 25,000 before contact with Europeans. In the 1820s, the Russian-American Company administered a large portion of the North Pacific during a Russian-led expansion of the fur trade. They resettled many Aleut families to the Commander Islands and to the Pribilof Islands. These continue to have majority Aleut communities. According to the 2000 census, 11,941 people reported Aleut ancestry, while 17,000 said Aleut were among their ancestors. Prior to major outside contact, there were approximately 25,000 Aleut on the archipelago. In other words, this people suffered high fatalities in the 19th and early 20th centuries from Eurasian infectious diseases to which they had no immunity. In addition, the population suffered as traditional lifestyles were disrupted. According to the up-to-date Encyclopedia Britannica Online, early 21st century population estimates indicated more than 15,000 individuals of Aleut descent. Russian traders and later Europeans married Aleut women and had families with them. History. After Russian contact. After the arrival of Russian Orthodox missionaries in the late 18th century, many Aleut became Christian. Of the numerous Russian Orthodox congregations in Alaska, most are majority Alaska Native in ethnicity. One of the earliest Christian martyrs in North America was St. Peter the Aleut. In the 18th century, Russia-Przemysleniki traders established settlements on the islands and exploited the people. There was a recorded revolt against Russian workers in Kamchatka in 1784. It started when supplies ran out which the Russians had provided to local people in trade for the furs. There was high demand for the furs that the Aleut provided from hunting. In 1811, in order to obtain more of the commercially valuable otter pelts, a party of Aleut hunters traveled to the coastal island of San Nicolas, near the Alta California-Baja California border. The locally resident Nicoleno nation sought a payment from the Aleut hunters for the large number of otters being killed in the area. Disagreement arose, turning violent. In the ensuing battle, the Aleut killed nearly all the Nicoleno men. Together with high fatalities from European diseases, the Nicolenos suffered so much from the loss of the men that by 1853, only one living Nicoleno person remained. Prior to major influence from outside, there were approximately 25,000 Aleut on the archipelago. Foreign diseases, harsh treatment and disruption of traditional society soon reduced the population to less than one-tenth this number. The 1910 census count showed 1,491 Aleut. In the 2000 census, 11,941 people identified as being Aleut. Nearly 17,000 said Aleut were among their ancestors. Alaskans generally recognize that the Russian occupation, while the colonists were limited in number, resulted in few full-blooded Aleut today. Full-blooded Aleut still exist and are growing in number, and there are also people who may be part Russian or other descent but solely identify as Aleut. In 1942, during World War II, Japanese forces occupied Aleut and Kiska Islands in the western Aleutians. They later transported captive Aleut Islanders to Hokkaido, where they were held as prisoners of war. The United States government evacuated hundreds more Aleut from the western chain and the Pribilofs during World War II, placing them in internment camps in southeast Alaska, where many died. The Aleut Restitution Act of 1988 was an attempt by Congress to compensate the survivors. The World War II campaign by the United States to retake Aleut and Kiska was a significant component of the operations in the Pacific Theater. Recorded Uprising in May 1784, local Aleut revolted on Kamchatka against the Russian traders. The Russians had a small trading post there, according to what Aleut people said, in an account recorded by Japanese castaways and published in 2004. Otters were decreasing year by year. The share in the return for the furs they made also were decreasing, as Russian ships stopped coming to the island. The Japanese learned that the Aleut felt the situation was a crisis. The leading Aleut negotiated with the Russians, saying they had failed to deliver enough supplies in return for furs. Nezamov, leader of the Russians, ordered two of his men, Stefano and Kazimov, to kill his mistress Onyushin, who was the Aleut chief's daughter, because he doubted that Onyushin had tried to dissuade her father and other leaders from pushing for more goods. That evening, hundreds of Aleut men gathered on a mountain and marched to the Russians' houses. When 5 Russians opened fire, the Aleut ran away. The next day the Aleut returned, but escaped again when the Russians started firing. While the men attempted another attack the next day, they yelled and moved more quickly towards the house. As Russians opened fire, they started to run away again. After they ran, Russians noticed that all the men had left the village. The Russians took around 40 women and children hostage, forcing the Aleut to surrender. The Russians killed 4 Aleut leaders. After they had been killed, the Aleut began to move from Kamchatka to neighboring islands. Nevizimov, leader of the Russian group, was jailed after the whole incident was reported to Russian officials. Written by Katsuraga Hoshu after interviewing Daikoku Yukodao.